Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Chats with Chels podcast. My name is Chelsea Miller, and I am your host for today and always until I have guests on, and then they can be co hosts. Anyways, hello. Happy Sunday. Hopefully, this will go live on Sunday. I am coming to you again with another update. It's a week 6 update. But I also thought it would be interesting to give you a little bit of a background story on how I got here, how I started getting into research and all of that. And for this story, I'm going to take you guys back to 18-year-old Chelsea. So grab your coffee or your tea or any sort of beverage and strap in because I'm going to be talking for a little bit. So, to start this story, I think I'm going to take you guys back to when I graduated high school. I was living with my mom still, and I had gotten accepted to Northern Arizona University as a dental hygiene student. And I had also gotten an offer for a full-time scholarship for a community college that was actually right down the street from where I was living. But unfortunately, 18-year-old me was like, I want to go to a university. And I say unfortunately because I didn't really have the knowledge base to make that decision financially. I didn't know what it would entail. So I graduate high school, I get excited to go to NAU, and I move there. And the first semester, I was living in a dorm and I was taking classes and things seemed to be going okay. I definitely had to take out some loans, and that was where the problem lied because I didn't actually know what those loans would mean for me, especially in the year following that. So I did my first semester. I was a dental hygiene student. I took like an introduction to nutrition class, but it was tailored towards people that were going into dental hygiene. And it was an all online based course. I really loved the campus. I loved the vibe of Flagstaff, Arizona. It's really pretty there. But something just didn't really feel right. And I didn't know why. And I also didn't know who I was when I was 18. I mean, who actually does? So the first semester was kind of a culture shock. I was still talking to my mom, and I think we had planned for her to come and visit, and then it actually switched and I just ended up going home for winter break. And I didn't really think anything of the situation. My mom was going through a divorce from my stepdad of 14 years at the time. And that was all like getting finalized within my first semester of undergrad. And so I moved home. She was relocated to a condo, and I just stayed there for the month of December, and then I went back to school. I had a part-time job at Sonic. I was actually a roller skating car hop for a couple years, which was kind of funny. I also worked at Bath and Body Works for a bit, and that was horrible. I will never, ever, ever do retail again based on that experience alone. But fast forward to the third semester at NAU, so the start of my sophomore year, things seemed to be fine at the beginning, but I realized partial way through that semester that the loans that I had gotten were not enough to actually cover all of the fees that I owed to the school. I had loans that were covering tuition, but I didn't realize that the loans that I had were not covering room and board and my meal plan, which was part of the reason why I was able to live on campus was because I had signed a contract for room and board and my meal plan. And that got really complicated. I was basically told by the school that I didn't have enough money to go there, and they restricted my meal plan, and they restricted my room access. So what ended up happening was that December, they had given me a date that I had to move out of the dorm, and my meal plan only worked for like certain cafeterias on campus. And I was still working, but being a part-time car hop at Sonic was not enough to cover the funds that I owed to the school for that whole year. Because I also wasn't in a place where I could ask very many people for help, because in order to co-sign on a loan, you have to have good credit. And my mom and my dad didn't really have good credit, and my grandpa didn't want to be a co-signer for me, probably based on his experience with my mom, which I learned about later. So the first year and a half of undergrad was very tumultuous. I didn't know what I wanted to do, really. I knew I wanted to go into dental hygiene, but I didn't know why. And I thought that joining a sorority would be a cool thing, so I did that for a bit, and that ended up being a not so fun experience. I just realized that sorority life was not for me. But also, NAU is not the school for me. Basically for the financial piece, but also looking back, I don't really feel like I fit in there the way that I wanted to. So come December of 2012, I moved out of my dorm and I moved back home with my mom. And around that time was when the divorce papers were finalized, and my mom and my stepdad had worked out a deal with the lawyers, and my mom had certain responsibilities that she had to hold up to, and she did not. And so my car ended up getting repossessed, and she also couldn't co-sign on a loan for me to get a car because her credit was bad. So I ended up getting a really overpriced, I'm going to put in quotations, deal with this secondhand car dealership, because one of the girls that I had started working with at a different restaurant, her boyfriend was a broker at this car lot. And so I had a car for a bit, but because my driving record was also really bad during that time, I had a really high car loan itself. Like the interest rate was really high, so the payment was high, but also my car insurance was high because I was a risk as a driver. So for any of you out there who are 18 and just got your license not too long ago, just obey the laws of the road. Don't run any stop signs. Make sure you're paying attention when you're merging onto the freeway, and don't speed. Really, that's all you have to do to have a good driving record. Anyways, so I dealt with this car loan for, I want to say 6 months. This is where the timing kind of gets a little bit fuzzy, just because I was honestly, looking back, I blocked a lot of it out because it was very traumatic feeling. But I had this car, I couldn't afford it. I was working as a full-time waitress at a different restaurant than Sonic at the time, and that just wasn't paying very well. And my mom started asking me for more money because, me and my brother were both living with her. And I come to find out later on, she just was horrible with money management. And I didn't really have anything to compare it to because that was all I knew. So if she asked me for money, I was like, well, yeah, how much? So that was part of the reason why I couldn't really afford my lifestyle at the time, because I wasn't having enough of an income to support myself and my mom. And that was a major driver for me actually choosing to join the military. I had met a person who was in the Air Force during my last semester at NAU. And originally, I was thinking, based on conversations that I had had with this person, that I was going to join ROTC and go the officer route and get my degree. But I just was not in the right headspace to continue with undergrad. And they would have had to fast track me. And at the time, doing anything summer school related was super unappealing. So I said no to ROTC. I said no to NAU. But when I moved home with my mom, things just started to get really uncomfortable financially. And the alternative was to reach out to a recruiter and go the enlisted route in the Air Force, which I ended up doing. And I didn't really have anyone to guide me through this process. I was the first person in my family, aside from my grandpa in the 70s, to join any branch of the military. And so I was kind of winging it and trusting that my recruiter was telling me all of the information that I needed to know to make an informed decision. And that was around, I want to say, August of 2013 was when I finalized all the paperwork, and they put me in this holding area, I guess. Sound like I'm herding cattle. No, but it's called the DEP, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's basically like a waiting period that you enter right after you finish writing all your paperwork and signing your contract for the military. And they shipped me off to basic training October 1st of 2013. And I knew what job I was accepting at the time because that was how I was able to fast track the process. So normally, if you get a job in the military, it can take anywhere from 3 months to a year, depending on the job that you want. And unfortunately, I just wasn't in a place in my life where I could be picky, and I didn't really have a lot of guidance. So I told my recruiter, what is the quickest way for me to get into basic training? And she told me, put security forces on your list. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with military terms, security forces is basically the Air Force version of a military police officer. So I went into the military as military police, and I went through basic training, and I got my first duty station after my training, and they sent me to Japan. And that was really cool to be living in Okinawa. It was a dream. And thankfully, the first couple of months that I was there, I met my husband. And that was when things started to open up for me mentally. I was exposed to a lot more life experience, and my husband was very honest with me about, the way the Air Force worked and the way that the job worked. And that was really helpful because I was new coming in and I didn't know anything. And I was trusting people that were purposely not forthcoming with all of the information because that's not really their job as leaders in the military. And I didn't really understand that dynamic at first. So it wasn't really until the time that my husband and I started spending more time together that I was able to kind of put the full picture together of what military life looked like, especially in security forces. So I'm really grateful for that experience because I felt lost before I met him. And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but it's true. I was not in a good place mentally, physically, financially. I was in a horrible spot. And it was really hard. I think being 19 and having to hear from your mom that she can't support herself is really hard. And it took me a long time to be able to talk about the next piece that I'm going to share. And I'm very open about it now because I think that it gives a lot of context for how I interact with people. And it kind of helped me redefine how I view the word family. So Ryan and I had been dating for over 6 months at this time that I got like a letter in the mail at my P.O. box in Japan. And it was this credit card company that was asking me to verify my personal information. And I thought it was weird because I didn't open up any credit cards. The only one that I knew of was one that I had opened with the military commissary, basically. And this was definitely not that company. And my husband and my father-in-law were like, this is a red flag. You should check your credit report. And I checked my credit report, and this was one of 5 credit cards that were opened under my name without me knowing within the year of 2014. And it was really unfortunate. And that's kind of an understatement. I had a feeling that I knew who it was. And this was based on a prior situation that I had had before I joined the military, which was another reason why I had joined in the first place. And because of my mom's mismanagement with money, I don't know what possessed her to take this route, and I don't really care to have a conversation with her to find out. But she was the one who opened up all these credit cards under my name without me knowing. And it started in the first year of my time in Okinawa. And I was at a place where I already was having trouble financially supporting myself. And I was in panic mode. So I filed a police report and I took her to court over it because I needed to be able to safeguard my credit and my stability in the military, because they can actually kick you out of the military for having bad credit. And the only way that I knew how to handle the situation was legally, because she had already done it to me before in 2013. And I handled that situation, I thought. But this is why I have no idea why. I just know that I had to handle it legally because that was the only way that I could control whether my credit stayed good or, in order to safeguard myself, basically. So that was a whole 2-year process. And also during that time, I felt like I started getting my life together. I was going to the gym. I was trying to eat better. And my father-in-law was having some heart problems related to early stages of cardiovascular disease. And my husband actually was the one who had asked him, have you ever tried a plant-based diet before? And my diet wasn't too far away from being plant-based. So I was like, well, if you want support, I'll try the plant-based diet with you. And that kind of piqued my interest to this whole nutrition space. And that was around the same time that I was starting to understand how ambiguous the term healthy eating really is. And I watched a lot of documentaries. I read the China study. I watched a lot of other videos from a lot of the doctors who are in a really early version of these plant-based eating documentaries. I think it was called What the Health. And so in Japan, I felt like I was getting my life together. And then back home, I had this reminder that I had to deal with some really heavy legal things. And I'm actually really grateful for that experience because it was the first time that I had to truly face reality that just because people are family doesn't always necessarily mean that they are good people or that they have your best interest at heart. And that was really the first time that I had reflected on my experience and my interaction with people. And it's unfortunate because it's my mom, like the person who birthed me. But that was around the time that I had truly understood what it meant to dissociate emotionally from a person. And I had the option to choose my family. It gave me the courage to take in people who have shown me good things and who have constantly told me that they believe in me and that they love me. And I've gotten a lot more selective over the years of who I bring into my life and keep. And I hold my relationships very closely. And not all of it's blood related. I would say 98% of the people who are in my life now are not blood related, but they've all taught me something very important. So I wasn't able to actually handle the legal action the way that I needed to until I moved out of Okinawa and back into the United States, because the legal office capabilities there were just not very robust. So Ryan got reassigned to a base in California, and because we were married, I was able to follow him on. So once we both moved to California, I had reached out to the legal office there, and I don't know how the stars aligned, but this woman who helped me, she did all of her training in the county bordering the one that I filed my police report in. So it was really awesome to have her knowledge and her contacts within the legal space out there in California, because she knew everyone else who I needed to contact in the state that I filed to handle everything. And, I had a detective assigned to my case. He was able to subpoena all the information, and we were able to prove that it was my mom. And legally, I was able to handle everything. Emotionally, it took me many more years after that to come to terms with, the loss of someone who I had trusted from birth. And it was really weird. But like I said, it taught me a very valuable lesson in dissociating myself when things are not how I feel like they should be. And that I can choose, if someone treats me poorly, to remove them from my life. And I think that helped me gain the confidence that I needed in myself to make decisions going forward. And that was the whole point of me sharing this story with you, is from the time that I was able to legally handle everything with my mom, that was the true start point of my ability to self-reflect and my ability to, take some of the self-blame that I had been harboring for a bunch of other things leading up to that point. And I actually think that it grew my relationship with my husband a lot stronger, because we had developed a different way of communicating than I was used to during the early years of our relationship. And this was even before we were married. But it was comforting to know that I had support from people who had also chosen me to be their family, even though we weren't blood related. I mean, that would be weird if my husband and I were blood related, but you get what I mean. Hopefully. So fast forward to, the end of my time in the military. This is now like 2019. I was in a place where I was transitioning out, and I had a decision to make on where to go to school to finish my undergrad, because I had been taking prerequisite courses throughout the duration of my enlistment, but I couldn't really pursue a degree in nutrition without being able to physically attend classes because of all the labs and, in-person experience that you needed to hold that degree. because at the time I thought, oh, well, the best route would be to be a registered dietitian. And so I started looking into nutrition programs in San Diego because my husband's family lived there. He's from there. And that was where we were planning to relocate once I separated from the military. So I applied to San Diego State without really any expectations because my grades from NAU were so poor. And I actually had to redo some early career biology classes because of how bad my grades are when I was at NAU. But SDSU accepted me and I declared my program in dietetics. And I knew the second I started taking classes there that it was the school for me, that it was the program for me, and that I had a lot to learn. And I think the common thread in all of the experiences that I've had in my life so far, because realistically, I'm only 30 and I have so much more life to live, but the experiences that had helped shaped me in my early 20s, it was all based in so much learning, the learning process, how to interact with that myself, but also how to share what I'm going through in a way that's maybe less emotionally charged and more, logically driven. Because that was something that I had struggled a lot with in my early years. And I still do to this day. I'm still an emotional person, but I'm able to kind of snap myself into the logical mind of I understand the steps at least. And it kind of helps take the edge off of that emotional reaction. So I went through my first year at SDSU under COVID because I started taking classes in January of 2020. And then, we all know what happened. COVID happened. And I think it was actually a really great time for me to be at home a lot because I was able to pursue some other hobbies that I didn't know I had. I started distance running and I was still actively doing yoga just at my house. And I had some really great yoga clients that were helping to support my teaching during that time. And I got to spend a lot of time with my husband, which was really cool. I think COVID itself was really traumatic, but I was grateful to be in a place where I had access to trails and that I didn't mind being alone a lot of the time out there on the trail. And running also helped me process what I was going through. I think in the wake of everything that happened with my mom, school was a good distraction, but I was still trying to learn how to learn in a way that was helpful and beneficial for me as a person. And I did a lot of meditating during that time too, and that helped. And it was really hard. If you have never tried meditating, I would highly recommend like a Headspace app or something guided. And maybe choose a guided meditation that's hard for you to handle. And during, 2020, I finally felt ready enough to even face what was happening to me. And Headspace had this really great 10-day meditation course on grieving. And it sounds weird, but I'm very familiar with the process of grief, not because someone close to me has actually passed away, but it was more of like a metaphorical death of my mom because I don't see her as a person that I look up to. And I don't see her as a person to help nurture me when I need it because she hasn't been that for a long time. And, I had the loss of a mentor metaphorically during late 2019. And so I was processing a lot of changing of my relationships. And it was really hard. But I think it made me a better student and a better partner and a better person. And I don't know if I would have chosen research if I hadn't gone through all of that, because a lot of those experiences were my first introduction to critically thinking about how to navigate an unfamiliar space is really hard. And I'm doing that with research every day because the purpose of embarking on this PhD process is answering unknown questions. That's how you get funding. What is someone looking into that you don't know the answer to yet? And it's really challenging to think about whether or not a question has been asked before and then how to approach answering it. And I think in a lot of ways, my life experience has been tailored to answering unknown questions and really hard ones at that. And I think one of the hardest questions, even to this day, to answer is, what does it mean to be healthy? I think I'll always be on a pursuit to find the answer to that question. And that was one of the main drivers for me choosing nutrition in the first place, because I wanted to feel more confident in my food choices that were coming from a place of well-researched and sound opinions from people in the field who were doing the work. And I, more so now than ever, want to be one of those voices, because I think if I can help someone interact differently with how they eat, and even just to make an informed choice about what food they're eating, no matter if it's, quote, a health food or not. Like, even if you choose to eat candy, at least know what it is structurally or something. So I don't know. I think research is so much more than just being an expert in a field and being able to talk about it. Being a holder of a PhD, same thing. It goes a lot deeper than just learning information about a topic and being good at talking about it. I think that people who pursue a PhD and excel in the space of teaching, they are drawing from life experience that is well beyond what you're doing in the lab. And that is something that I am called to take a step towards every day. Even on my hardest days, when I'm feeling the most doubtful, that never changes. So this is a long-winded way of saying that I found research, or maybe it found me, at a time where I was ready to take a step into the unknown with supportive people behind me and a yearning to learn as much as I possibly could at the time. And that's still true. I don't know what I have to learn. It's all unknown. But every day I take a step forward towards the goal of being able to talk about things from a place of knowledge and hopefully being able to share that with someone in a digestible way. So I guess that takes me into present day Chelsea pursuing a PhD in nutrition, and my week 6 experience. You guys, this week was a lot. I think I had talked to you guys after I had come off of, a downward spiral after my stats class. And I swear that class is just going to be, I'm laughing because it's just getting more ridiculous the more weeks I get into the class. Anyway, so I guess I'll start on Monday of this past week. We had gotten our midterm assigned to us in nutrition, in advanced nutrition metabolism class. And there was a multiple choice component, and then there were 5 take-home questions. And my professor gave us so much time to sit with the information and write about it, which was really cool and really overwhelming. And I also found out from my stats professor that on the Thursday, our stats midterm was going to open, and it closed on Friday, the day after. So I had 2 midterms in the same week. And I also was having a hard time with the fact that I'm not really doing any research right now. I know, like deep down, I know that there really isn't an expectation, but the expectation is coming from myself. And that's something that I've had a really hard time with this week. And not just with the research and lack of productivity there, but also in my classes. I think this week was a tough reality check that I don't trust myself. I don't trust what I know. And that's really hard. And I'm actually getting a little bit teary-eyed thinking about that, because I think this is the first time that I've actually said that out loud. I know other people have told me, trust yourself because you're just doubting everything and you know the information. But this is the first time that I've actually said out loud that I really don't trust what I know. I'm trying. I think the more steps towards finding the answers to unknown questions, the more confident I'll be, but also the less confident I'll be. It's like this weird middle ground, I think. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize that it's a very common feeling, which is both comforting and not. I guess we all seek out comfort in times of doubt or sorrow. I'm not thinking of the right word here, but suffering. I actually just saw something about this on Instagram today. Anyway, what I was trying to point out is I am seeking comfort in other people who are also feeling the same doubts that I am. And it's a very weird space to be in because I kind of want the validation, but I also want to move past this feeling because it's not healthy for my mental health long term. And I know that. But this week was not the week for me to move forward from it. It was a week to sit in it. And I felt the doubt every time I sat down to write a question answer for my nutrition midterm. And I felt it the second I opened my stats midterm and saw how many questions there were, and that the expectation would be to write about the theories that we were then having to do a formula to calculate in R. And, I was working through it. I was reaching out to people for guidance on how to get through these types of exams because I have never had like a take-home exam. I have never had an exam that is only based in short answer questions. It's always been a multiple choice of some kind. Even if there was like a little bit of fill in the blank, it wasn't to the degree that it is in the classes that I'm taking now. So I would say I was more confident in the nutrition material just because I have a stronger background in that than stats, which is 0. But I faced the exams anyway, and I got to a point where I was almost done with both of them. I think by Thursday evening, I only had part of one question to answer for my nutrition class, and then I had 3 questions remaining on my stats exam. And that Thursday, I had spent 6 hours working on this exam. I was feeling good about it. And Friday started off as such a good day. I made a latte and it tasted amazing. I went into my office and I was going to ask a couple of questions to my colleague about some theory-based stuff. And I went to open my code in R for my stats exam, and the entire document was gone. All of my work was not saved. And I don't know what happened. I keep replaying it over in my mind. I played it over in my mind that entire morning. And I actually like panicked outwardly to the point where one of my colleagues came into my office and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm not actually." Like all of my work on my midterm was gone. It disappeared. I don't know how. I am 100% sure that I saved that document exactly where I save all of my other documents for this class. And for some reason, R decided not to save any of my material. And so I cried. I bitched about it. And then I was like, well, I got to do it. So I ended up redoing my entire 20 question stats midterm. And thankfully, I was able to finish. And after getting over that initial panic, I was able to kind of remember some of the things that I had said about each question the day before. And I'm not saying that R preserved my information because it absolutely did not. But there's this cool feature in our program where it saves your code history. And it only saves the code. It doesn't tell you like what chunk it came from. It doesn't tell you what line it was on. And the like file that I use to also write in, it's called R Markdown. None of that saved, but at least the code that I had to run for each problem was still there. And so I was able to kind of like piece everything together. And it still took me like 7 hours, I think, to finish this exam. But needless to say, I was able to successfully piece it together. And I submitted both of my midterms on time, which was a huge turnaround from the week before. If you remember, I was really struggling with my nutrition homework. And I actually ended up turning in one of the assignments a complete day late. And for me, that's a big deal. For my professor, it's not a big deal. And I learned just how insignificant the due dates are for my nutrition class after sitting down with my nutrition professor in a one-on-one office hour just to chat about how I'm feeling. And he genuinely wanted to know how I was feeling and to take the expectation that I was creating in my mind of him away. And that was really helpful. I think the common theme of this entire week was, sitting in my own discomfort, but also really trusting the guidance from people who are further along in their program than me and people who have been teaching for a while, that we all go through these feelings. And I would even argue that people who are not in the academic space also go through this to some degree. Maybe not in the context of learning new information about a specific topic, but just, life experience is really confusing and it's hard to navigate. And if you don't have any good mentors, I don't know, it would take a lot longer. I think it would still be possible because we're all free thinking people. But I don't know. This week was very pivotal because I don't really necessarily feel like I'm better. I'm just more equipped to handle the unknown right now. And I genuinely don't know if this feeling is going to stay because often it doesn't. But I feel like the more I experience the unknowns in all of these classes, it's almost like it's breaking down the surprise of it all, the shock of it all, the culture shock change of taking in all of this information I don't know. And it's sort of desensitizing me to it, which in my past experience has actually been really important for my learning process, is desensitizing myself to the shock of the emotion that I feel initially. And it does allow me clarity when I'm thinking about things. So going into week 7, I'm feeling hopeful. I'm feeling more organized. I actually generated a document for my lab report this week, which is new because I haven't actually taken the time to do that until this week. And I'm just feeling really grateful for all of the people that I have around me that support me, even at a distance. A lot of the friendships that I curated in my time at SDSU have since stayed with me, and I've really leaned on them. And it's been really nice to have them lean back in and say, I got you. It's okay. I understand. I'm going through it too. Because there really is comfort in the company of suffering. And it's a slippery slope, but I do think to a certain extent it's helpful to know that you're not alone. It feels less isolating that way. And I guess we'll see what week 7 brings. I have no expectations. I am going to try my best, and that's really all I can give right now. I want to say thank you for listening to my background story. I know a lot of it may not have seemed relevant, but to me it is. And I think talking through my military experience, it's come full circle because this day 10 years ago, I raised my right hand and swore in to the Air Force, which is pretty wild. I feel old now. Granted, I joined when I was 20, but 6 years is a long time. And no matter how much I hated the experience and the situation that had drove me to saying yes to the military, I am incredibly grateful for all that it taught me and the people that I met along the way that were there for a purpose of any kind, whether it was positive or negative, because those years, I think, were even more formative of who I am now than my teenage years or my childhood growing up. Because up until I was 18, I had a very privileged lifestyle, and there was a life that was rooted in stability, and I didn't really know what hardship looked like. And I still feel very fortunate to have, I guess, guided myself through it in a way that I still had resources to use during that time. And I think that's where I will wrap up today, is in a state of gratitude and hope for week 7. Thank you all for being here, for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. And I will see you next week for another update and maybe another story. Talk to you soon.